Hey nerd family! This fortnight we are talking about fantasy, and not with like whips and chains and stuff. Fantasy novels or fantasy TV shows, movies, or fantasy games. I love the Final Fantasy series. Each one is a new world, a different fantasy landscape, but some elements always remain. High magic content, lots of big creatures to fight, and leveling up your character. So role-playing games usually happen in a kind of fantasy realm. There are some exceptions. There are sci-fi role plays which I really enjoy too. I think we've spoken on the channel about the difference between sci-fi and fantasy, and I think it just comes down to whether it's like future or past. I can't remember who it was that said it, but basically any science, if sufficiently advanced, will seem like magic. I would say my top fantasy book series was The Wheel of Time, which was written by Robert Jordan, the same guy who wrote the Conan series, and it's about a world in which women wield magic traditionally because men who hold magic are mad, and it goes on to be a 14 book epic series, which is kind of amazing. Obviously, I do like Game of Thrones. I haven't read them yet, so I don't know if I can comment on anything too deeply in that. But also, a friend of mine introduced me recently to a 9-book series with a kind of reimagined history of the Napoleonic War, where there are dragons, which is awesome. That's called Temeraire. And I can't go talking about fantasy without mentioning my favourite fantasy film, which is Enchanted. And it's basically Disney taking the Mickey out of Disney, which is kind of awesome. It's the traditional Disney story with the princess and the prince and the love and all that kind of stuff, but it happens in the real world where they've kind of slipped out of their fantasy other dimension and come into our world and time, and it's kind of amazing but also kind of tragic, which always speaks to me. Fantasy games, obviously Final Fantasy, but also I really enjoy tabletop fantasy games, and I know that on this channel we've done National Tabletop Day once. I wish we'd done it more often, but Dungeons and Dragons, I play it with some work colleagues now, which is awesome. I think I talked about that recently, and I just really enjoy getting involved in the theory crafting, the creating of characters initially, and obviously playing it after that. But I could make characters over and over again, and I have done. I helped people in the D&D group make their characters. D&D takes me on to my nerdy pleasure, which is finally having seen Stranger Things. If you haven't watched it, some of the characters in that play Dungeons and Dragons, and it's quite a big part of those characters' kind of friendship circle. Definitely give it a watch. It's amazing, and hopefully they give it a sequel. And my nerdy question is, if you could splice together any two film genres or times, then what would it be? I particularly love Firefly because it's like a space western, so if you could do something like that and make a movie or book series out of that, let us know in the comments. With that, Carl, I'll see you on Tuesday. I'll see you guys.